Hey everybody, welcome to the 72nd edition of Drive Through Review. Today I'm going to talk about Hammer of Scots. It's a Columbia block war game for 2 players. Plays in 2 to 3 hours. I would say you're going to go the long end on that, especially your first several games. I did a review of Julius Caesar, and that is a little simpler of a block game. This one is a slight step up. I would say it's not a whole huge jump from there. There's some different rules with wintering, basically a phase at the end of the turn that you need to keep in mind. Your first couple of rounds, I think you'll get it in your first game. There's a couple little tricks with the different kings on the different side, sort of historical chrome or flavor that they've added in the game. I think really adds to the game. Sneak peek, I'd like this better than Julius Caesar, I think. It sort of depends on my mood, obviously, but this has got those extra little nooks and crannies that are really cool, and I don't know. I think the history of it probably has more to do with it than actual gameplay. So let me jump into a little bit about how it works, and I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, so in the game of Hammer of Scots, you're going to get a few things. You're going to get different blocks. The red blocks here represent England. The blue blocks represent Scotland. You're going to get 4 dice. You're going to get a large deck of cards. The cards are going to be 2 types. You're going to have cards here with numbers 1, 2, 3, and then there's a smattering of event cards here that'll do different little actions. Not very many event cards, but they are in there. So I've got the camera zoomed in here a little bit for the board, and this is the setup for the Braveheart scenario, or if you were going to play the whole campaign through all of the years. You can see that on the right hand side. You start the setup like this. Now, I've got all the blocks face up. Now typically, like any block game, your opponent won't be able to see the blocks. So England's going to sit here at the bottom, and he's going to turn the blocks up like that. And then the Scottish player will sit at the top of the map, and then he'll turn his blocks like so he won't see them. But the setup is a little bit, might seem a little bit daunting at first, but it's not. The cool thing is a lot of these blocks are nobles here. So you can see Steward here, and he's got this little sigil here. Well, that matches the sigil of his home, and you're going to be referring to that throughout the game. So the setup is basically you put all the nobles where they go, matching the sigils, and a couple other little differences, like this little unit here is in Lothian. And Wallace starts up here with a couple little troops up there. Now each player is going to be dealt 5 cards to start a year. You're going to take turns both simultaneously playing a card and then moving and then resolving any battles that may happen. And then after both players have played the 5th card, then you're going to basically increment the year marker here and then play to either the end of the Braveheart campaign, or if you started the Bruce campaign, you'll start there and play to the end of that. Or if you played the whole campaign, then you'll play all the way down the year track. So as I said, cards are played simultaneously. So let's say the left-hand side here is player 1, and the right-hand side here is player 2. They'll both reveal their cards. The higher number card is going to go first, and they will take that many movements. So the left-hand player here, let's say is Scotland, they'll take their 3 movements, and then the English player will take their 1 movement. If the English player on the right here had played an event, then the event would happen first, and then the Scottish player would take his 3 movements. If both players played cards of the same value, then there'd be a tie, and in that case the English player would always go first. If both players play an event card, then you'll resolve both events, but then the year will immediately end, and you'll immediately move this down the track. Now, movement is going to be restricted by this value here on the lower left-hand side of the block. So this unit here could move 2 spots, and Wallace here could move 3 spots when either of these was activated. So for example, say the Scottish player had played this card with 2 movements. That means he can activate 2 groups, not 2 different blocks, but 2 actual groups of blocks. So I could choose this area, activate all of these blocks, and choose this area and activate all of those. Now normally they could move up to their movement cost there, but you also have to keep in mind the color of the border that you're moving across. So you can see there's a green border here, and then there's a red border here. And even moving across this border here, there's a green border on this side here from going from this area to this area, and there's a red border here going from this area into that same area. Now the rule with the border is you can move up to 6 blocks across a green border and up to 2 blocks across a red border. But if you move across a red border, then they have to stop. So if I chose, I could activate this area here and move them down south here across this red border. I can move 1 and then 2, and then they have to stop, and I can move no other units across that border for this turn because it's a red border and has a 2 movement maximum. Now I could have, if I wanted to, separate the areas that I wanted to move these to, so I can move 1 here and then 1 in here. You don't have to all move them to the same spot. And then I could also activate my second area because I played a card with a 2 on it and move all of these into here, like so. Now at any time after you've resolved everybody's movement, then you're going to immediately initiate a battle. The last little caveat with movement is this dotted border here, and you can see this is England, where you've got all of Scotland up to the north. Now England during the course of the game is going to draw units and place them in England, and they're going to start to want to move more units up into Scotland. But it's going to cost 1 whole movement point to move 1 block. So if they had played a card with a 2 here, and they just move 1 of these blocks into one of the adjacent territories, that would eat up 1 of these points, and then they have to move a second block because they're going to amass quite a good amount of units in this area. So they're not going to be able to move them all in at once. So let's take a look at this fictional combat scenario. Let's say I had moved in with Wallace and this other unit as the attacking Scottish player to attack this defending English player. Now the way combat's resolved is you're going to take a look at this lower right hand letter here, and see this one is an A and this one is a C, and so all the A's are going to go first, followed by B, C, and then D. And then in case of a tie, since these are both C's, then the defender will roll before the attacking C. So the number of dice that you roll is equal to the block's health. So as this block would take damage, it will go down and down and down until there is no health, and then it's dead. But it's also the number of dice it will use. So if Wallace comes in here, he's going to attack right away, quickly because he's an A, with 4 dice. And now the number that you need to roll is you need to roll this number down here next to the A. So this is an A3, so I need to roll less than a 3, or 3 or less, I should say. And so that would inflict 1 hit on this guy. So now he's got in a quick hit before he can even fight back because he's an A. He's got the quicker initiative. Now the defending player will attack and he'll roll 3. So he's a C2. He would have needed to roll 2 or less. So he's got 1 hit. Now I have a choice as a defender to who to apply this hit to. Now you have to apply it to whoever has the most health left. So if this unit was already down to 2 health, I'd have to apply that hit to Wallace because they all kind of go down evenly. But since in this case they're both tied, then I can choose who I want to take the hit. Now Wallace is better than this guy, so I'm going to have this guy take the hit. Now it's also possible as the attacking player to have reserves. So if I had moved these 2 blocks in from here, and then use my other movement point, because in our example we've got 2 movement points, this block in from here, then he's not going to join these guys in the first round of combat. He's actually going to stay hidden until the second round of combat happens, and then he's going to be revealed, and then he's going to be able to join in at the second round, because you can only have attackers, initial attackers from one area, and you choose which area you want that to be, and then you can bring in a reinforcement from another area. In the same way, the defender could have a guy, let's say he had a guy over here and he brought him in, then he would come in, and it's called basically reinforcements. It works effectively the same as reserves. So in the first round, only these blocks will fight, and then in the second round, these 2 will be revealed and then join the battle. Now the attacker has 3 rounds that he has to be able to defeat all of the units here. So he's either got to defeat all the units, or they have to retreat across friendly or neutral borders, and then the attacker will take over the area. If he doesn't do it by the end of 3 rounds, then he's got to retreat back to where he came from. Now you retreat when you normally would be that unit's turn to fight. So in this case, since Wallace is an A, he's going to get a shot off on these English players before they come around, because this one is a B and this one is a C. So Wallace would attack, and then if they wanted to retreat, then they could retreat. Now if you kill a unit that is a noble, just like Dunbar here, then you're immediately going to capture it, basically, and turn it to your side. And then there is a replacement block in each color here that signifies this noble. So the point of the game is to go and try to capture at least all of the nobles from the other side. And if you capture all of the nobles, then you basically immediately win. If not, then you play a certain number of years. Whoever has the most nobles at the end wins. There's also another sudden death victory condition, and that's if the English player kills the Scottish king here on the left, or the Scottish player kills the English king there on the right, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So after you've played your 5 cards, you've done your movements, your battles, then you're going to have wintering phase. And the first part of that phase is everybody's going to move back to their home. So in this case, we've got Galloway. Maybe he was out gallivanting, and then he's going to retreat back to his home, and he's always going to start there. Now you can see that this area here has got a 1, whereas this one over here, Non's got a 2. Now what these are replacement points. And what you can do with those is you can either bring a unit back to some health. So let's say Galloway came back here at 2 health. I could spend that point and give it another health. Or I could draw from the face down Scottish blocks and draw a new block and put it in here at 1 health like that. So it's sort of a way to get more blocks on the board. Everybody comes back, they kind of rest up for the winter, they heal up, they get more reinforcements, more troops, get the people rallied up, and get prepared to fight the next year. Now you need to be careful, because if there was an English block in this area here, and then at the wintering phase, Galloway comes back here to go back to his home, then you're immediately going to lose Galloway, and he's going to be replaced with the English version of that block. So as you spread out and as you do battle, you need to also cover your tracks and make sure that you maintain control of all of these different areas on the map. Now what the English player is going to do is he's going to use these controlled areas to generate the health of his blocks. But when it comes to getting new blocks, he's going to draw from the face down blocks. He's going to draw basically half of his blocks, and he's going to put them all over here in England on the side here, and they're going to come in at full strength. But remember, for him to get them out of England, he's got to spend 1 whole movement point to get them from here into there. So there's some real interesting things that happen in this area, especially towards the later part of the game. Now there's a couple more special blocks that I want to go over. These two are kind of funny here because these are Ulster and Wales. And so if you use these in battle, then you're actually going to have to roll to see if they stay or they chicken out and basically go back to the draw pool. I find that kind of funny. Secondly, we have this Norse unit. And so this can travel by coastal areas and basically leave this area and go to any other area on the coast. And it basically uses 1 movement point to do that. So it's kind of a nice little sort of mercenary that can travel around and give you support where you need it on some of the coastal areas. It can never go into England, however. Next, we've got King Edward. So this kind of represents Edward I as well as Edward II. So if you kill this guy basically twice, then you win as the Scottish player. And there's a couple of wintering rules about where the first Edward can winter and where the second Edward can winter. I'm not going to bore you here, but they're pretty straightforward. But you've got to keep in mind where he ends his turn at. And there's a couple rules about who can winter with him as well. Next, if you're the Scottish player and you have 8 nobles under your control at the end of the winter phase, then you can add the French guy here to your draw pool of possible blocks. So the French kind of get under your favor, and then now they're going to join you and fight the battle with you. Now lastly, we've got the Scottish king here. I'm not going to go into every detail, but basically, if Wallace has died, and then you have Bruce or Comine in the area of Fife, which is up on the north of the map, then you can crown them king. Because Wallace is he's a badass. Okay, he's got 4 dice, he's an A3, he's gonna romp around. Now if he dies, you're in big trouble. So you can take and you can convert Bruce or Comine to the king, but then the other ones are gonna defect. So there's just a quick little paragraph in the rules of how to do that, and that's pretty cool little aspects. Basically, Wallace dies, and then now you've got the king running around, but now if the king dies, then the Scottish player loses. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that overview. That actually was like 30 minutes long, and I cut it down to around 15. So, congratulations to me, I guess. But I just wanted to mention a couple things. So, like I said, when the king dies, the English king dies, then he basically becomes Edward II. But also, when you hit the changeover from the Braveheart scenario to the Bruce scenario, if you're playing the campaign, then he will also change over. Basically, the old king dies, and then the new one comes up. And the other thing I didn't mention was there's actually a French king if you've got the French knight out in Scotland. And then you can actually have the French guy become the king. And so you've got another king that way. So there's a couple other little things like that. There's a little rule with archers and that. So if you go on the Geek though, and there's 2 files. And I'm just going to kind of show them here because there's a whole bunch of really good files for this. I really like this file here. It gives you a breakdown of all the units and kind of what's special about them. Really easy to refer to. And there's a little 2-page deal by Kent Tuber here that basically has all the rules of the game in quick 2 pages. And the only thing you're really going to be referring to is the wintering stuff. That's where it gets really tricky, is like, okay, so I got to do this with that, and okay, the English player brings in how many blocks, and the Scottish player can use these. There's certain spaces of the noble spaces that have a church on them, and you get an extra repair point with those spots. So there's a couple little things. It's not really too bad. You're going to have to do a learning game. And for example, any game that I played, I never saw the French king, scenario come up. So there's going to be little kind of caveats and pivots on certain little rules that you need to follow. I will say though that adds to the theme of the game and the enjoyment of the game for me, because the thing about these block games, and at least the Columbia ones, and I'm sure some of the other good ones that are out there by other companies are the same, you have this real basic sort of, you move blocks, it's kind of hidden stratego type of thing, and you've got some sort of tactical area stuff. But there's just little splashes of the flavor and the history in there that are built into the abstraction, and it really sort of impresses me that they're able to do that, as opposed to maybe a traditional war game where you've got lots of tracks and counters and tables and all that stuff, which there's nothing wrong with. But for my feeble mind, it's really impressive that they're able to do this in this really thin layer of abstraction. So you can tell I like the game. It's really highly ranked on Board Game Geek. I think with good reason. I don't really know what else to say about it. I would say check it out. If you're a war gamer, you probably know all about it, you probably have it. If you're not a war gamer, you're probably not interested in it. But I would say it's worth sitting down and kind of going through some of these historical games just for a nice diversion. If you're so into mechanics and that kind of stuff, or super thematic games like Dragons and stuff. Nothing wrong with those. I love all those games too. But I think it's a nice little diversion. Sort of, I'm gonna get too friggin' academic with this, but sort of like in a spiritual way, sort of an experiencing history kind of way. It's interesting to me. I never would have thought that, playing like a war game, it's just like, I beat you up and you beat me up, and that's not really what it's about at all. And it's probably less competitive to play a war game than playing a Euro game, which is weird because they don't have war games in Europe or whatever, I don't know. I don't like stereotypes, but there's a reason they don't have war games in Germany, blah, blah, blah. So, but they're the most competitive cutthroat games out there, and you play a war game with most people, it's like, oh, that's cool. That was an interesting scenario or tentative history. It's not about beating the other guy up so much, at least in my experience. So it's kind of an interesting paradox. So anyway, I like the game. That's all I can say. Thank you.